After all the craziness of the last couple days, it's easy to forget that the Jets actually have a game on Monday, and it's a winnable game against a struggling opponent. But winning this game will require the Jets to refocus after a turbulent week. Let's discuss today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Jets fans and Bills fans. It's another episode of Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, alongside Joe Marino, the host of Locked On Bills, here to prepare you for Week 6 action. It will be Monday Night Football, the Buffalo Bills visiting the New York Jets at MetLife Stadium. You should know that Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, Joe, it's great to chat with you again. I love twice a year we get to do this. A pretty eventful week for the New York Jets. How are you doing?
John, I'm doing well. Obviously, an important AFC East game here for the Jets and Bills. And, you know, the Jets never are short of supplying storylines. And that's the big talk, right? The Jets dismiss Robert Saleh ahead of this game. And I'm sure there's a lot to get into, not only for Sunday or Monday night, but, you know, what this means for the Jets moving forward. And so what's like your quick reaction? How are you feeling when that news came through? Were you surprised? Like, what's the John Butchko interpretation of this move?
I was very surprised. And the reason I was very surprised is that Woody Johnson has owned the Jets since 2000. And you got to think about, you know, some of the seasons we've had where, you know, you had the Adam Gase 2-14 season in 2020. You had the 2018 season with Todd Bowles, where it was clear he was a lame duck halfway through. And we could go back and talk about some of the other frustrating seasons the Jets had that have led to coaching changes. But never once in Woody Johnson's tenure have the New York Jets made an in-season coaching change until this week. And I believe they had even said in public that it was their policy to not make a change. And, you know, Joe, there's a lot of mystery surrounding this change because Joe Douglas, the general manager, it doesn't seem like he was all that involved in it. Woody Johnson said he called Douglas to consult him, but Woody Johnson said, it's my decision. And at the press conference Tuesday, Joe Douglas was nowhere to be found. So I've never seen a situation where the head coach is fired and there's a press conference and the GM isn't there, and except in cases where the GM was fired at the same time. Woody Johnson said he spoke with Aaron Rodgers Monday night, but this didn't come up, which surprises me because, you know, even if Aaron Rodgers, you know, there's all this speculation in New York, how much does Aaron Rodgers have to do with it? Even if Aaron Rodgers has nothing to do with it, he's the starting quarterback. You'd think that if you're going to change the coach and you're chatting with them, you know, you're 12 hours away from firing the coach, that might come up. So the Jets, the guys in the locker room, there have been a lot of reports how Jets players were shocked by this. This really kind of came out of nowhere. So it's kind of difficult to know what to make out of it. Robert Saleh was 20-36 as Jets head coach. The team was off to a 2-3 start this season. Quincy Williams, one of the best players on Sunday after the loss to the Vikings, said, you know what, this team needs to start showing accountability, which, you know, it was kind of an indictment on the job Saleh has done so far. But despite all that, I got to be honest with you, I was surprised, and I'm not sure what the future holds. I mean, this is a team that's at a critical point in the season, and this kind of shakeup, you know, it could go one way or another. I guess, you know, maybe at the risk of stating the obvious, it could go one way or the other. But I'm surprised that they made a change before such a critical game, because if the Jets win this game, they're tied for first place. I think with the tiebreaker, they actually are in first place. And if they lose this game, they drop to 2-4. They'll be on, you know, a 3-game losing streak. That's the point where the season, you know, could really start to go sideways. It's an interesting week to make this change.
Yeah, I agree with you. And maybe my thoughts on this would actually surprise you, because for as much as it's easy to, you know, cast shade over the Jets for the decision that they made, and if the leash was always this short, you know, why was Robert Saleh the head coach? I get all that, and certainly invoking Aaron Rodgers and his influence on the operation. But I think the reality is the season hasn't gotten away from the Jets, and 2 of their 3 losses are against NFC teams. You know, if you're going to lose games, those are the ones to lose. You're looking at a schedule now that faces the Bills, Steelers, Patriots, and Texans. Those are 4 critical AFC games for the Jets, who we know come in with a lot of hype and a lot of expectation. based on the status of their defense and what it's been with Aaron Rodgers and, his status in the league and what he can mean to elevate that quarterback play of this team. And so kind of my interpretation, John, is what do you have to lose? You just continue with Robert Saleh and you stumble to an 8-9 record, and that's not good. Maybe this is a spark, right? We've seen coaching changes spark teams sometimes for only one game, but there's a one-game bump that's typically there. The win percentage of coaches that are fired, right? The record before they're fired is like a win percentage of 26%, goes up to 43% in that first game after. So maybe this is a spark for the Jets, and maybe the reality is there's not really any harm in doing it. I think the harm could have been staying the course and acting like maybe there wasn't friction that everybody could see. And you've seen the accountability word used now from a key player on defense and a key player on offense. I think it's easy to cast shade, but maybe there's really not any harm. And this is a critical point in the season and you're looking for a spark, and maybe this is it.
Yeah, I think there's something to the idea. It could be a short-term spark. In fact, I wouldn't be that surprised to see the Jets go out and play really well on Monday night. I think the questions are longer term. In fact, on Locked On Jets, I myself said that, I felt like you reached a point where things were with Saleh that maybe a change for the sake of change was worth it. I think that the issues the Jets have is that the head coach was not the only problem. Jets have had big problems on the offensive side of the ball. And I think the interesting thing is that, Woody Johnson, the owner, when he spoke to the media on Tuesday, suggested that the offense was a big motivation for the change. Well, as you know, Robert Saleh is a defensive coach.
Right.
Nathaniel Hackett has come under a lot of scrutiny from myself included, by many people, myself included, during his 2-year tenure. Jets did not make a change at offensive coordinator. Now, Jeff Ulbrich, the new interim head coach, says he's going to look everything over. So there could be a change. In fact, actually, interestingly, Robert Saleh was so shocked by this firing that he apparently had already decided to strip Hackett of his play calling duties this week. And then 5 minutes after he made the final decision, he was called into Woody Johnson's office and fired. But as I said, there are other issues. The coaches who are most responsible, I think, for the Jets' struggles on offense are Nathaniel Hackett and the offensive line coach Keith Carter, who, at least at the point we're recording this podcast, are remaining in place. And even if they're demoted, Jeff Ulbrich ruled out any personnel changes to the coaching staff. He said some responsibilities could be shifted around. But even if they're demoted, that's Jeff Ulbrich's call. That's not the owner's call. The owner said we wanted to fix the offense. And I don't know that getting rid of Robert Saleh fixes the offense. I think the Jets have other issues. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, to be frank, has looked like he's 40 years old. That's not to say that he's washed up, but he does not look like the guy he was in Green Bay. He doesn't move nearly as well. And of course, the Achilles injury probably plays a part in this. Against Minnesota, I thought there were many instances where he kind of was rattled by not pressure, but the specter of pressure. I thought there were instances, the first hint of pressure, he was just trying to get rid of the ball wherever he could. And that's really limited the Jets' ability to make big plays because the downfield passing game's kind of off the table and Breece Hall's not breaking big runs. I think the Jets' defense, although it's been statistically at the top of the league, a lot of that might be due to the competition. They played Denver, Bo Nix, in a rainy day where Bo Nix really couldn't throw the ball. Tennessee, Will Levis really struggled. New England's offense has all kinds of issues, as we know. So I don't know. I don't think firing Saleh is a bad thing, but I don't think it's like the magical. I don't think it's the magical formula that's just going to fix everything wrong with this football team right now.
How does the offense get on track? Because, 30th in yards per run, 27th in yards per pass, 25th in scoring. It doesn't look good here. Is it just a matter of Aaron Rodgers hasn't played with these guys very much, and there's a huge chemistry dynamic that's always been important to Rodgers and how he plays the game? Or is there scheme flaws? Is there personnel flaws? Like, what's holding this offense back?
I think all of the above. The one silver lining for the Jets in their loss to Minnesota is that it felt like Rodgers and Garrett Wilson started to get on the same page, and that had been a real issue through the first month of the season. But Garrett Wilson went over 100 yards for the first time. But Mike Williams, who was supposed to be a big addition, has kind of been an afterthought in this offense. The offensive line has not played at the level the Jets hoped it would. Tyron Smith has not been awful, but he hasn't been the Tyron Smith we knew in Dallas. John Simpson, who they brought in to play left guard, just has not been good. Joe Tippmann, the center, second year, having a very up and down kind of season. The offensive line has been shaky. I think in pass protection, back-to-back weeks where Rodgers has been hit 10 times. But the bigger issue arguably is the run blocking. Is the Jets can't run the ball right now. Breece Hall is having an awful statistical season, and I think some of it's on Breece because the Jets couldn't run block a year ago. He was still able to hit some home runs. He really has not been a big play threat this year. So it's a little bit of everything. The personnel, the chemistry, the coaching's not good. The play calling, the Jets have pretty much been trying the same stuff for 5 weeks, and it just hasn't been working. They don't really use formations to free their receivers up to give, there's nothing about the Jets play structures that stress the defense. So that's also an issue. I think the Jets are very predictable with their play calling. I think it's just all of the above right now. I don't think you get to the point where the Jets are on offense and there's a simple answer. I think that it's a lot of things that are not going well right now.
Well, John, you always give it to us honest, so I certainly appreciate your insight there on the Jets.
Well, Joe, of course, now that we've talked about the Jets, let's talk about the other team. The Buffalo Bills started the season hot with a 3-0 record. A couple of tough losses to tough competition and road games in the AFC. And here on this crossover edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills, we'll find out what's going on in Buffalo. This episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills is brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted to a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Free alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how you use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15%. This episode of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills is also brought to you by Game Time. And you should know that Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And Game Time's just an amazing app. I've used it myself a couple times. Joe, let me tell you a story. Last year, I was in San Diego for the holidays. My dad got the family tickets for the Holiday Bowl. 6-year-old nephew is upset because my dad didn't get him a ticket. So I pull out my phone. I'm like, I got this, everyone. I pull out the Game Time app. It's 2 hours before kickoff. We got a great seat. We got a great deal. Game Time helped us save the day. If you're going to Jets Bills Monday night, there's no better place to get your tickets than Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, alongside my friend and colleague, Joe Marino, the host of Locked On Bills. Well, Joe, obviously a very dramatic week for the New York Jets. Robert Saleh getting fired. I know things haven't generated as many headlines in Buffalo, but Bills coming off 2 straight losses to tough opponents. What are the feelings right now around this team?
Yeah, it was a great start. 3-0 was a great start for the Bills, and certainly played offense the way that you kind of were told it was going to look like in this efficiency everybody eats. And then the last 2 weeks feels like things have gotten off the rails. The game script got away from them against Baltimore, couldn't stop the run. Derrick Henry running all over the Bills, and then you fast forward to the Texans game, and the Bills just were unable to get the offense going and seize any momentum. And so 2 weeks in a row that the offense has kind of let them down. And so that's the question, is how does this offense get back on track now, right, against the New York Jets, a team that I know that they have some injuries on their defense, but still known for their defensive ability. Certainly 3 in a row on the road for the Bills. This is the 3rd in a row. They went to Baltimore, to Houston, now to the Jets. And so the big storyline is, how does this Buffalo Bills offense, in particular the passing game, find itself after a really strong start?
And one of the things for the Bills is, even though you've lost 2 in a row, I don't think it's like there's a lot of shame in losing at Baltimore and at Houston. I mean, those are 2 of the tougher road venues in the AFC. How much of it do you think with just the difficulty of the opponent? How much is it? Do you think was it the Bills not playing well?
Well, I certainly understand that. I think a lot of it was the Bills not playing well. And in particular, the things that made the offense successful in the first 3 weeks of the season, they got away from it. All of a sudden, this team became this vertical passing offense. And quite frankly, the Bills don't have the personnel to do that. They don't have dynamic down the field wide receivers. And Josh Allen is throwing the ball deep, which means 20 yards or more from the line of scrimmage, the second highest rate of any quarterback in the NFL. Johnny's 4-20. 4-20 on those throws. It doesn't make sense for that to be such an important part of what your passing game operation is. And so it's really important for them to get back to being efficient with the ball and taking checkdowns and being able to use the short passing game and relying on yards after catch. That's when they've been at their best this year. And so ideally they'll get back to that. And I know maybe the natural response is, well, did the first 3 weeks reveal a lot about the Bills offense? And you just had two teams that kind of adjusted, and the Bills won't be able to get back to those things. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the Bills have seen more man coverage the last couple of weeks. They've seen a lot more one high, middle of the field close coverage, which invites the deep ball, which invites, throws to the perimeter against your wide receivers. And I feel like the Bills have been almost arrogant to not being able to admit that that's not really the strengths of who they are, or at least Josh Allen in particular. And he needs to kind of get back to doing, hey, just do the smart right thing with the football. Don't big play hunt. And I think getting away from some of that, while they've had some protection issues with scheme, there's been some issues along the way. I think at its core, it's being willing to embrace an efficient style of offense as opposed to stop looking for those big plays.
The Jets offense has struggled the last 2 weeks against two teams that kind of blitz from all angles in Denver and Minnesota. What can you tell us about this Bills defense, both stylistically and their performance level right now?
Yeah, lowest blitz rate in the NFL. So I don't think blitzes are going to be on the table. And quite frankly, when they have blitz, it's not been good. They've kind of leaned into, foolishly, some third down man coverage and blitz looks, and teams are killing it. So from the Bills' perspective, hopefully they put that on the shelf because it hasn't really worked. Now, maybe that's a different story. The Jets have had issues with picking up blitzes. They've faced some blitz-aggressive defenses. Injuries on the offensive line. Maybe you can stress that into some unique ways. And so maybe it's not the right time to put it on the shelf, but structurally the Bills are going to play zone and they're probably going to rely a lot on organic pressure to get there. And I wonder if, based on what's been put on tape the last couple of weeks, if they switch that up a little bit to try to throw off the Jets in ways that maybe the last two opponents have been able to do. But that would be a deviation from the style of defense that the Bills are deploying, and certainly I'll be curious to find out if they lean into more of that, because it could be a ripe opportunity.
Who are some of the key players that Jets fans may not be familiar with?
Christian Benford, cornerback. That's going to be a fun matchup, whether it's Garrett Wilson, who would he get 22 targets last week? We know Aaron Rodgers likes to throw the ball to that guy. He should, right? But that's a lot of volume. Christian Benford's been unbelievable in terms of he was really good last year as a starting corner, and he's really kind of taken it to another level this year with just not giving up much in coverage at all, but the physicality and tackling. I think he's a name to be really mindful of. Dorian Williams, a second-year linebacker out of Tulane, replacing Matt Milano, who got a bicep injury in camp and has not been available. He stepped in and played really good football, fast, physical, urgent player. He's a guy to keep an eye on. And then offensively, I think Jets fans are probably pretty familiar with Khalil Shakir. He missed last week against Houston, and you could tell that the Bills missed him sorely. We'll see if he can go this week. He had an ankle deal. He'll be important on the offensive side of the football as you look at this Bills team that no longer has Steph Diggs and Gabe Davis in a really remade passing game. Khalil Shakir's that guy. He's the number one, if you will. Maybe he's not a traditional number one. He's the guy that has the most receptions, yards, touchdowns on this team, even despite missing one game. So he's kind of a very important piece of this offensive equation.
Well, Joe, thank you for helping Jets fans get to know the Buffalo Bills a little bit better. So you've heard the storylines around the Jets, what a crazy week it's been in New York. You now know everything that's going on with the Buffalo Bills. As we continue here on our crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills, we'll talk about paths to victory for these two teams as they get ready to play Monday Night Football. Our crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Joe, there's been a lot of talk this week about how different things will be for the Jets under Jeff Ulbrich than they were under Robert Saleh. How much better will the team be? Will it make the team better? Will it make the team worse? Well, the odds makers at FanDuel don't seem to think it'll make that big of a deal. The betting line started with the Bills favored by 2.5 points on the road. Right now, the line continues to be 2.5. Bills favored by 2.5 points on the road on FanDuel. And again, it's the best place to get in on the action because you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that's FanDuel, FanDuel.com. It's Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, alongside my colleague Joe Marino, the host of Locked On Bills. Get ready for Week 6 action. Buffalo Bills visiting MetLife Stadium to take on the New York Jets Monday Night Football. Of course, these two teams played at MetLife Stadium Monday night a year ago. A game I think like both fan bases would love to forget because the Jets lost Aaron Rodgers for the season and the Bills lost the game on an overtime punt return by Xavier Gibson. Joe, hopefully this game goes better for both teams this time. It will be Jeff Ulbrich's debut as Jets head coach. What are your keys to victory for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, it's interesting kind of going back to the scene of the crime, like you mentioned, for both teams. I think there's three things that are really important for the Bills on Monday Night Football. Number one is efficiency in the passing game. Robert Saleh has said it in the past, and I know he's not the head coach, but I think the principle remains. The Jets are a team that are willing to dare Josh Allen to be patient with the football. And boy, was he ever patient the first 3 weeks of the season. He's so patient. He just did all the smart, right things with the ball. It was so beautiful. And the last couple of weeks, he's gotten away from that. And he hasn't thrown an interception this year, which I know is a big storyline with Josh Allen, and that's great. But this wouldn't be the week to suddenly start being more risk willing with the football. DJ Reed's obviously playing out of his mind this year, and Sauce Gardner's a really good corner as well. And so I think the Bills need to be willing to revert to being efficient with the passing game, getting the backs involved, getting the tight ends involved. Khalil Shakir, if he's available to play, this isn't the week to go big play hunting and throwing the ball down the field. It's time to get back to efficiency in the passing game. So for me, that's number one. Number two is you got to play with an awareness of the game script. There's some strange dynamics in this game. You have a Jets team that just fired their head coach in week 5. They're coming after playing in London. They chose not to have their bye week this week. They were willing to play a game. And so those are weird dynamics of certainly some injuries on the Jets side of things that we need to monitor. But also you have a Bills team that's looking to get out of a rut. They've lost 2 in a row, not normal for the Bills. In fact, since 2020, the Bills until last week were 14-4 coming after a loss. They don't typically lose 2 in a row. And now they're staring at a possibility of losing 3 in a row. And, to me, it changes the dynamics of the season for the Jets. Like we talked about in the opening segment, this was probably thought of as a move to galvanize the troops here with the Jets as they are not wanting to let the season kind of get away and make the path difficult for them. It's still open, right? For whatever you want to think about it, the Bills certainly haven't played at a level that makes you say this is their division and they're going to run away with it, right? I know that the Patriots and the Dolphins don't look great, but Tua will come back at some point, and this Jets team obviously is trying to rally here. And so I think this is a turning point. And so I think you have to play with an awareness of game script. Like I mentioned, only no interceptions for Josh Allen this year, 2 offensive turnovers at total for the Bills. Like this isn't the game to feel like everything has to wake up. There's a good chance this is a defensive struggle on Monday Night Football where the Jets, we've talked about their own offensive issues. The Bills offense has not been good the last 2 weeks. So if a drive ends in a kick, that's probably okay. I think you have to be willing to embrace the style of game that probably is going to happen on Monday night. And the number 3 is don't lose the game on special teams. I think the Jets, if there's been something good about them that's been consistently good, it's that they're good on special teams. Punting game, they cover kicks and punts. Their return game usually pretty good. They've blocked a punt already this year. And the Bills have been up and down on special teams. They've had an extra point block this year. They've had some field goal miscues. They've given up a kick return for a touchdown. They lost to the Jets on Monday Night Football in overtime because of that. And so you start to look in where the margins are and where, the Jets can find an advantage. I'm sure they're thinking about special teams. And I think the Bills have to be very careful to not let that be a determining factor on Monday night.
Great analysis, Joe. I think for the Jets, the first key is just have a good week of preparation. And I know you can say that every week, but there's so many interesting dynamics, as you mentioned, about this week for the Jets. Jeff Ulbrich taking over. And as we talked about earlier in the show, this was a shock to the system for a lot of guys on that Jets team. I think for all of Robert Saleh's faults, he had not lost that locker room. This was not a case like Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas a year ago, where the players are going to be refreshed to have a new voice. I think there was some surprise. So for Jeff Ulbrich, it's going to be getting the players in the right headspace for this game. The Jets also need to figure out who's running the offense this week. Joe, I don't know who's in charge of the Jets offense, because as we talked about, Saleh was about to demote Hackett, and Ulbrich said, we're going to take a look at everything. So I couldn't tell you who's going to be calling the plays for the Jets Monday night. So a lot of it is just going to be about just having a good week of preparation. And while that's true every week, I think with so much in transition for the Jets, that's going to have to be a big focus. The second thing for the Jets is I think they need to be disciplined in their pass rush lanes. There are a couple of times this year where they've been hurt by quarterback scrambles. Especially week 2 against Tennessee against Will Levis. Jets almost lost that game. One of the biggest reasons was they were having trouble with Levis breaking plays, taking the ball down the field. Josh Allen, obviously a very mobile quarterback, very adept. If you give him room to run and nobody's open, he can make big plays. The third thing for the Jets for me is they need to figure out how to unlock this downfield passing game. It's a little tricky because the Jets don't really have a great speed guy in their receiving group. They have, Garrett Wilson, who's quick separator, good after the catch guy, a good route runner. But, despite the 4.3 40 he was timed out of the combine, not really a great deep threat. Mike Williams, a good back shoulder guy. He can win a contested ball down the air. He's a guy I think they need to get involved more. He's been kind of an afterthought, as I mentioned, in this offense. Had a big catch on a back shoulder throw in the fourth quarter, week 2 against Tennessee. One of the pivotal plays in that win on a 2nd and 16. Rodgers found him. Little involved 2 weeks ago against Denver. But he hasn't really found his role in the offense. And I think, he might be a guy who can help them in that area. Alan Lazard, three balls hit his hand last week. All of them would have been big plays that fell to the ground, incomplete, did have a touchdown. But they just need to figure out a way to push the ball down the field. And with Rodgers right now, maybe a little uncomfortable with his pass protection. And with Rodgers banged up, it's amazing because Aaron Rodgers left that game against the Vikings with a sprained ankle. There's been so much crazy going on around the Jets this week. We haven't really talked much about the fact Rodgers might be playing at less than 100%, which would normally be storyline number one. He's not really that comfortable with his offensive line right now. So if the Jets need to max protect, they need to leave a few guys in. They need to figure out a way to produce big plays in this passing game because they just have not been doing that yet at this point this season.
Yeah, it sounds like one team's trying to produce big plays in the passing game and it's not really working. And then of course you mentioned the Jets and kind of their own issues there. So it's almost like if either team starts hitting explosives in the passing game, especially against these defenses that are historically very good at not allowing explosive plays in the passing game, that would be interesting if the vertical passing game wakes up for either team this week.
Well, Joe, it's great chatting with you. I always enjoy our discussions before Jets play the Bills. I'm glad we get to do it twice a year, and I look forward to chatting with you when the Jets head up to Buffalo a little bit later in the season. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it, and we'll see where these teams are at. Maybe it's one of them's running away with things. Maybe the season's gotten off the rails for somebody. That's why you got to play them all, and you see what happens, right?
But as bleak as this game feels, first place is on the line in the AFC East. The winner of this game is going to be in first place.
Someone's going to be the 4th seed in the AFC this year, right?
Absolutely. Well, Jets fans and Bills fans, thank you so much for tuning into our crossover edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Bills. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, along with Joe Marino, the host of Locked On Bills. Tune into Locked On Jets, Locked On Bills tomorrow. We'll continue to preview our Week 6 matchup between the Jets and Bills. Until then, I hope you all have a great day.